girl finally found a place where the shadows of fear no longer chased her. Upon being taken in by her grandmother, she felt an immediate sense of relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Her grandmother's house had that familiar scent of comfort, something that made her believe that nothing could go wrong there. However, as soon as the last ray of sunlight faded, she realized that the shadows in her grandmother's house were different. They weren't like the ones in her old room that vanished with the rising sun. These had a weight to them, as if they were waiting for something, waiting for her. It didn't take long for her to realize that the figures never left her. During the night, as she tried to sleep, she could feel something lurking. The shadows, discreet, moved from one corner to another of the house, but they weren't just shadows. They were shapes that stretched, twisted in ways that made her tremble. She, so small and full of fear, thought about calling her grandmother, but a whisper in the air stopped her. Something told her that speaking up would only reinforce the presence of the horror. Silence, as terrifying as it was, seemed like the best course of action. It was then that, in a burst of courage, the girl revealed to her grandmother the details that haunted her. With wide eyes, the grandmother listened attentively as the girl described the figures that appeared in the shadows. Men with wide hats, women with expressionless faces and twisted bodies, moving without making a sound. The terror the girl felt was more than obvious, but the grandmother, instead of showing surprise, simply said, "I know what you saw." The grandmother's words, more than a comfort, seemed to prepare her for something even more terrifying, as if the truth about those figures was about to be revealed. After the girl's revelation, the grandmother remained silent for a moment. The fear the girl felt seemed to be something deep, something beyond simple childhood imagination. But looking into the girl's eyes, the grandmother knew she was not dealing with an ordinary nightmare. What the child described was real, and the shadows were not just spirits wandering the world, but malevolent presences feeding off fear, the deepest and darkest emotions. When a child was vulnerable, they appeared, drawing closer, waiting for the right moment to fully reveal themselves. "They come when you're weakest," the grandmother continued, "and they won't leave until they get what they want." The grandmother's words made the girl's body tremble, as if the terror, until then hidden in the shadows, was now fully in the light. But the grandmother, in her wisdom, did not let the girl sink further into fear. "You have a power greater than you think," she said with a calm voice. "These figures can be frightening, but there are ways to push them away." The girl, still feeling the horror in her chest, looked at her grandmother with a mix of hope and doubt. The shadow in the corner of the room shifted slightly, as if it were listening. But something in the grandmother's voice made the girl feel an odd calm, as if the house, no matter how filled with shadows it was still the place where she could finally feel safe. The night went on, and the shadows, as always, continued their path. The grandmother, with her unshakable calm, guided the girl to understand that this was a battle of very ancient forces, where light and darkness were constantly at odds. "They only have power over you if you let them," she said, as the two sat together in a corner of the house. The grandmother revealed that those figures, which seemed to want to devour the child with their empty eyes, actually fed off the energy of those who feared them. The secret was in confronting them, challenging their presence with courage. But could the girl do it? Fear consumed her to the point that even with her grandmother's words, the terror was still rooted deep within her heart. The figures didn't leave as the days passed. On the contrary, as the girl became more accustomed to her grandmother's presence, the figures grew bolder. The girl no longer saw them only at night. Now they appeared in broad daylight, in the shadows of the walls, and even in the curtains that swayed gently as if playing with her. Horror was everywhere, and the girl began to question, what did the figures really want? The questions that arose in her mind were like a maze with no exit, where each answer seemed more terrifying than the last. She wondered if the shadows would ever truly disappear. But something unexpected happened that night. As she lay down to sleep, the girl heard a faint sound, almost imperceptible, coming from the corner of the room. A murmur, followed by a soft rustle, as if the figures were drawing closer again. Fear gripped her once more, but she remembered her grandmother's words. With a deep breath, she looked directly at the shadow and for the first time felt a slight power. A power that, perhaps, was the key to finally ending that cycle of terror. but doubt still lingered. Was it really possible to confront what came from the shadows? Or was she just another victim like so many before her? That night, something changed. The girl, with her eyes fixed on the shadow watching her, felt the presence drawing closer and closer. The grandmother had always said that the key was in confrontation, but she had never imagined she would be tested so quickly. Suddenly, the shadows began to move aggressively, enveloping everything around her with overwhelming force. But then, something unexpected happened. The girl finally understood the true power she had inside her. The shadow that once seemed uncontrollable now began to retreat in the face of her courage. But when she thought she had won, a figure materialized before her, and it wasn't just any figure. It was her grandmother. But she was different. Her eyes were empty, as if her soul had been consumed by the shadows. The girl, with her heart racing, realized with a chill running down her spine that the figures weren't just manifestations of fear. They were feeding on something even more precious, the souls of those who dared confront them. And now I ask you, what would you do if you had to face something like this? If your greatest shadows became real, and you were the only one who could stop them? Would you have the courage? Or would you succumb to the fear like so many others before you? The figures still lurk, waiting for the right moment to strike. And you, are you truly safe where you are? If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to hear more terrifying stories. The real question is, are you ready for what comes next?